So what's that old saying? Man makes plans and God laughs. Well, apparently when Mercedes made the plan to introduce the Neue SL in sunny California, basically Orange County to Palm Springs, they thought that there would be the delivery of wonderful weather. Apparently God laughed at that plan, and here we are driving a very important new convertible in soup. Now, I can't tell you about this car, at least the way it drives, until like mid-January. That's a long time. So while I had some time to drive slow, I figured I'd switch on the cameras and you and I talk a bit of really like deep down stuff about the new SL, because I had the opportunity to talk to both the chief engineer, great guy, and the chief exterior stylist, and got some good insight about the whys and wherefores of the new SL and how it became what it is. So that's what you and I are going to discuss today. Now, before you and I dive off into the weeds, the obvious question, just where are we? Well, this is Palomar Mountain, which is northeast of San Diego, and normally a stunning place to drive because it has absolutely magnificent roads. But in my more than 12 years of doing this, I have never seen such bad weather for the intended car. You know, yeah, I've seen bad weather, but like ice driving in northern Sweden for an SUV, not a convertible. With that, let's dive into the headline here, and that is, why is this thing a 2+2, meaning it has a back seat? Now, for the avoidance of doubt, when we talk back seats, it's a back seat like a 911. I would argue it's actually kind of smaller. So why did they take that decision? Well, I had a good dinner last night with Frank, who's the chief engineer of this vehicle, and he was pretty direct about it. They had the idea of doing a 2+2 for this generation of SL, but what they did in the last couple of years of the previous generation SL, as well as the clinic for this SL, they asked the customers, the people who are actually looking to buy these things, well, do you want a back seat? And according to Frank and some of the other folks that I spoke to, including one of the designers, they got the input from people who are driving these things. They're like, look, I'm not looking for the back seat of an S-Class, but every once in a while, maybe something that can turn into a parcel shelf, maybe something, hey, the kids want to go with me to the restaurant downtown and I'm only in the car for like 5 minutes, that would be useful. Now, to be honest, I wouldn't put anybody back there. I think they would be your enemy, not your friend. Maybe a child. I don't think you can put a baby seat back there. To me, it's more about the proportions, and this is where we get into the discussion I had with the designer. This guy, fantastic guy, German, but he runs exterior design for the Carlsbad studio. And the big thing we had over a discussion with cigars last night was when you add more length to the car, more wheelbase, and the wheelbase here is pretty different. It's 5 inches longer than the previous generation of SL, and as it would compare to a 911, it's 10 inches longer. So this is quite a long vehicle when you consider what it is. Really, that's kind of a sporty GT car. He was saying that the beauty of putting in that extra length, it helps with the proportions of the vehicle, or in this case, with stunning curvature on the fenders as well as the quarter panels. Like if you look at the car from either the front or the plan view, which is looking at it from the top of the vehicle and looking down on it, you can see how much width there is in the fender from, say, the shut line of the hood to the actual opening of the fender. Same thing in the rear. It's actually more pronounced in the rear. Then there's that all-wheel drive system. Yeah, they get the performance bump, but in reality, this is all about selling these vehicles in colder northern climates, whether it be northern Europe or the northeast of the US or say the Midwest. And there's the soft top, and here there are a number of moving parts, excuse the pun. Let's start with the obvious, and this is probably the party line. There is a technological performance advantage by lowering the center of gravity. It lowers the weight of the car, and it's an easier mechanism to package when the top is down. Now that's all true, but I, for one, from a design perspective, find it much more attractive. I would say the vehicle looks more organic, especially when you consider not just Mercedes, but Mercedes, BMW, and Porsche all have been doing the same trick where you look at the soft top and you don't see the bows. It doesn't have that hungry cow look. So the overall design, they can keep the one line that Mercedes in this case came up with for the look of this vehicle, and it's preserved even with a soft top. I would argue it's complemented more because one can put in a contrasting color of the roof, which really makes the car stand out in the right color. Like for example, this like greenish, brownish Magna, which is like a matte finish in the Mercedes world with a red top, stunning. The chalk color with a red top, beyond stunning. Believe it or not, the yellow with a black top looks pretty good. So I would argue it was a gimme for the designers to make this stand out in a sea of hardtop convertibles. Then that brings us to the design of the vehicle. I've got some folks who are fellow pilot friends at the airport, and a bunch of them own SLs, whether they're Pagodas or newer SLs. That's kind of in the mix. But most of those guys who are older, they don't like this design. They're just not a fan of the design. And I would argue, for those of you that don't like this design in pictures, you need to see it in person. It absolutely changes in person because you see the three-dimensional, almost design tricks. That's what changes this design, or at least that's what makes this design stand out. And look, we finally get some sunshine and I can see what the actual Palomar Mountain looks like. That's into a valley looking into San Diego over there. Anyway, back to the design. This is an interesting story that I found out. Most car companies, this is just a Mercedes thing, they have design studios around the world. This is larger car companies like Nissan, Ford, General Motors, Mercedes, Volkswagen. And when they come up with a design, it doesn't come from like one main studio and other studios work on small parts. What they do is they set off like a bake-off. There's a competition between each design studio, and they all submit sketches for what they think the new car that they're working on is. Now, granted, the general direction and theme is set by the chief designer or the board of management or whatever it may be. Like in this case, they did set the theme as, we want a car that is going to be a 2+2, we want a car that's going to have a soft top, and we want a car that's going to be all-wheel drive. So those are the only parameters they had, and then obviously that it's an SL. But in this case, there were sketches that were put in by Stuttgart, and then there was a sketch put in by Carlsbad, which is their advanced design studio in California, which actually used to be a Chrysler studio. Back when they were Daimler Chrysler, when they got divorced, Mercedes kept that studio, Chrysler got rid of it. Well, apparently, the sketch that came from Carlsbad was so amazing, it was an almost immediate decision that they went with this sketch. So if you and I are tying this into SL history, it's amazing how much America has played a role in not only the development of the SL, but the fact that the SL even exists. Because if you go back to the original SL, the Gullwing, that came off of a race car, it was the importer, Maxie Hoffman, that went to Mercedes and said, look, I know you built a race car, but I think we can sell these things. They didn't take him seriously. So he said, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna pre-order 1,000 of these things, and if I pre-order 1,000, will you take me seriously? I'm like, okay, just write us a check and we'll do it. And sure enough, they ended up making 1,400 over a 3-year model run of Gullwings. So here we are coming full circle into the modern day SL, and not only is it a world car, probably one of the most important cars for Mercedes-Benz, but the design, the sketch that set the overall look of this generation of SL came from the market that gave birth to the street-going SL. Okay, so that's the whys and wherefores of the exterior design. Now let's move inside, and here it's kind of the intersection of previous Mercedes-Benz design, current Mercedes-Benz design, as well as some playfulness. Let's start with that playfulness. Notice the air vents as well as the speaker grills. Burmester, I'd like to point out, this, it stands out. It's not just the vent itself, which looks like the turbine from a jet engine, and that's paired with a bezel around the vent, which in turn works in conjunction with the tactile feel of the top of the dashboard. Notice the seams from the back of the vents themselves goes all the way to the front of the dash, and then there's a seam with a contrast stitch that goes all the way around the vehicle. So that's kind of the playfulness as well as old world design from previous Mercedes. Then of course there's this and this. This is practically lifted from the new S-Class, the W223 S-Class. However, there's a couple of changes. Notice you look at this and it's not all screens, which I am incredibly thankful for. And yeah, there are some knobs, like the start-stop, as well as the headlight switch, as well as some playfulness in the window switches. However, they've done the same thing here with everything being haptic feedback. We've discussed this. I would like to have more knobs, more toggle switches, especially when it comes to things you use on a regular basis. Like here's a perfect example. If I want to switch between drive modes, important in a car like this, all I gotta do is go to this knob here. I can do it with my thumb, I can do it with my fingers, but it's in a very central place and there's tactile feel to it. Everything else goes through that screen, even putting the roof up and down. Now there's two ways to do it. There's a button here where if I hit it once, it goes into the mode to switch the roof up or down. So I can hold it here or hold it here and I can put the roof up or down even while the car is moving. Or I can hit this a second time and the roof will go down if I hold it. You can also do it from outside the car by holding the key fob. So this is something where I'd like to see more of like a real switch, not this here. Now for the avoidance of doubt, everything else works kind of the same as in the S-Class. The one other difference in the transition of moving this screen to the SL from the S-Class, this is adjustable and that's a function of the roof being up or down and the glare that would be on this screen. So it moves just a little bit by hitting this button here. So I can put it up or I can put it down. And even when you lock the car, it'll move the screen forward. Now, as you and I drive through the thriving metropolis of Warner Springs, a bit of a recall from last night's presentation of this vehicle. They call this whole interior design hyper analog. So in the EQS, where it's like one whole screen, they call that the hyper screen. This, they're trying to bring in a more traditional look to it. And I applaud them for that. Although, while this is not technically the wish list, that's going to have to wait for the full first drive review, I will give you like an advanced look at the wish list. More toggle switches, more knobs, like these kind of playful knobs like the start switch or the headlight switch. Let's put them here and here, as well as a volume knob, not only because it's safer, but because this is a luxurious vehicle and you've got these wonderful, playful design touches. One needs more of those in a car like an SL than, say, a Tesla. I understand this is what the kids want today, but in order to appeal to the kind of folks that would want to drive this, not just the ones that can write a check, but the kind of folks that would look up to wanting a vehicle like this, the kind of folks that would aspire to a vehicle like this, you need more playfulness. Now, as the sky begins to look a lot more ominous in the direction that we are going, which means it'll most likely just open up, let's pause the conversation there, because any other discussion we have will get us dangerously close to violating the global embargo, which lifts in the middle of January, and that's the point where we will release our full first drive review, where you and I are going to do our usual stuff, drive it fast, push it, understand driving dynamics, talk about all that kind of stuff, and there is a lot to discuss. I just hope I can find a dry enough and clear enough road to do this on, because I still have yet to shoot that. So at this point, I'm going to turn the episode around to you guys, and let's make this a free-form discussion. Let's not just talk about the three things we discussed, well, three or four things. We talked about the overall design, why it's a 2+2, the soft top and the all-wheel drive, as well as some historical stuff. What are some input you want to feedback either to Mercedes or where you'd like to see the direction of the SL going? Put that in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV all in word, MotoManTV all in word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I would once again humbly request your help with the algorithm. What does that mean? Yes, click subscribe and notifications. And if you are still not getting notifications, you need to unsubscribe and resubscribe. This is how stupid YouTube is and why we are locked where we are locked. And yes, you definitely need to hit like and share these episodes with all your friends on all your socials. Until I see you in the next episode, and depending on when you see this, Fru Weihnachten.